Three disturbing horror stories about the attic. My mom never made it sound like a warning. That's what confused me the most. She didn't sit me down or try to explain anything. No long conversations. No stories to scare me. Just one simple rule said the same way every time. Calm, quiet, like it was something obvious. Don't go into the attic. That was it. I remember the first time I asked why. I was standing at the bottom of the hallway, looking up at the small ceiling hatch, barely even thinking about it. It just seemed like a normal question. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up at the attic door. Not quickly. Slowly. Like she was checking something. Then she looked back at me, her expression completely neutral. "You don't need to go up there," she said. Not strict, not angry, just certain. After that, it stopped feeling like a rule. It felt like something already decided. Like the attic wasn't just off limits. It wasn't meant for me at all. For a long time, I didn't question it. The attic was just there. A small square hatch in the ceiling at the end of the hallway. No ladder, no visible handle, just a thin outline where it met the plaster. Easy to ignore if you weren't looking for it. And I wasn't. Not at first. Days passed normally. The house felt quiet, predictable, safe in the way all familiar places do. There was nothing strange about it. Nothing that made me think about what was above me. Until I started noticing something. At night. It wasn't a loud noise. Not footsteps. Not movement. Just a presence. A kind of silence that felt different from the rest of the house. Heavier. Like the air above the ceiling wasn't empty. I remember lying in bed one night, staring up, trying to focus on it, listening carefully. The house was still, but the space above me didn't feel still. It felt occupied. I told myself it was nothing, just imagination, just the way old houses sound at night. But even then, something didn't sit right, because it didn't sound like noise. It sounded like something trying very carefully not to make any. At some point, it just became normal. That's the strange thing about rules you grow up with. You stop questioning them. They turn into habits, and habits don't feel like choices anymore. They just feel right. I stopped looking at the attic, stopped thinking about it. Even when I passed the hallway, even when I stood directly beneath that small square in the ceiling, I never looked up for more than a second. Not because I was scared, because I didn't need to. It was like my mind had already decided there was nothing worth seeing there. Years went by like that. The house stayed the same. Quiet, still, predictable. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up for no reason. No noise, no movement, just awake. And every time it happened, I'd have the same feeling, that something above me was awake too. Not moving, not making a sound, just aware. I never told my mom, and she never asked. But once or twice, I noticed something I couldn't ignore. Sometimes, when I walked past the hallway at night, she would be standing there, looking up. It didn't start loud. It never does. The first time I noticed it, I almost ignored it completely. I was lying in bed, half asleep, not really aware of anything except the quiet of the house. Then I heard it. A soft creak, not from the walls, not from the floor, from above. I opened my eyes slowly, staring at the ceiling without moving. The sound didn't repeat right away. Just silence again, like nothing had happened. I told myself it was the house settling. Old wood, temperature changes, normal things. I closed my eyes. Then it came again. A second creak. Slightly different this time. More deliberate. I stayed still, listening harder now. A few seconds passed. Then something shifted. Not loud enough to be footsteps, but too controlled to be random. Like weight moving carefully across the space above me. I felt my chest tighten. Because it didn't sound like something walking freely. It sounded like something trying very hard not to be heard. And for the first time in years, I found myself looking up at the ceiling, not out of curiosity, but because I suddenly felt like something up there knew I was listening. I asked her about it the next morning. I tried to keep it casual, like it didn't matter. Like I was just making conversation over breakfast. "Do you ever hear something in the attic?" I said. She didn't react immediately, just kept stirring her coffee. "No," she replied. Simple, flat, final. I waited a second, expecting her to ask what I meant. She didn't. "I heard something last night," I added. "Like movement." That made her pause, just for a moment. Then she looked up at me, not confused, not concerned, just focused. "You didn't go up there?" she said. Not a question, a statement. I shook my head slowly. "No." She held my gaze for a second longer, like she was checking if I was telling the truth. Then she nodded once and looked back down at her cup. "It's an old house," she said. "You'll hear things." That was it. No curiosity. No follow-up. Nothing. But something about the way she said it didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like dismissal. Like the sound didn't matter. Or worse. Like she already knew what it was and didn't want me thinking about it. After that, I started paying attention. Not openly. Not in a way anyone would notice. But every night I listened. At first, it was random. A creak here, a soft shift there. Easy to explain away if you didn't think too hard about it. But the more I listened, the more it stopped feeling random. It always happened at the same time, late, quiet, when the rest of the house felt completely still. And it always followed the same pattern. A faint sound, then silence, then another movement, slightly closer to the center of the ceiling, like something adjusting its position. I started counting the seconds between each sound, not because I wanted to, because it felt predictable, controlled, like whatever was up there wasn't just moving, it was repeating something, testing something. One night, I stayed completely still, barely even breathing, just to see if it would change. It didn't. If anything, it became more precise. And that's when something clicked in my mind that made everything worse. This wasn't just noise. It was a routine. And it didn't feel like it was for me. It felt like something up there was following a pattern it had been doing for a very long time. I didn't plan to open it. That's what I told myself. For days, maybe weeks, I had followed the same routine. Ignore the sounds, don't look up, don't think about it. Just like I had always done. Just like she wanted. But something changed. not in the attic, in me. The pattern had become too clear, the sounds too deliberate. It stopped feeling like something I could ignore and started feeling like something I was being kept away from. And that made it worse, because if there was nothing there, why the rule? One afternoon, when the house was completely silent, I found myself standing in the hallway, right under the hatch. I hadn't even noticed myself walking there. I just was. I looked up, really looked this time. The outlines seemed sharper than before, the edges darker, like it stood out against the ceiling more than it should. I reached up slowly, my fingers hovering just below it. For a second, I hesitated, not out of fear, but because something deep inside me was telling me, if you open it, you don't get to pretend anymore. The hatch opened easier than I expected. No resistance, no creaking, just a soft shift as it moved upward, like it had been opened recently. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I pulled it down slowly, revealing the dark space above. No ladder, just a wooden beam I could grab onto. I hesitated for a second, then climbed up, pulling myself into the attic. The air felt different. Not stale, not dusty. Just still. Too still. I crouched there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. The space was smaller than I imagined. Slanted roof, wooden beams, old boxes pushed into the corners. Nothing unusual. Nothing alive. I let out a quiet breath, of course. Nothing. Just a normal attic. I almost laughed, but something stopped me. A feeling. Not from in front of me. From behind. I turned slowly. The space I had just climbed through looked deeper than it should. Like the darkness below wasn't just a hallway anymore. Like it was watching me from underneath. And for the first time, I realized something that made my chest tighten. The attic wasn't empty. It was quiet. Because it didn't need to hide until I came up. I climbed down faster than I went up. Not running, not panicking, just not wanting to stay there any longer. The moment my feet hit the floor, I pulled the hatch closed above me. It shut with a soft click, sealing the attic back into silence. For a second, I just stood there, listening. Nothing. No movement. No sound. The house felt normal again. Too normal. I told myself it was over, that I had imagined the feeling, that the attic was exactly what it looked like. Empty space and old boxes. I turned and walked back toward my room, and that's when I heard it, above me. A soft shift. I froze. Slowly I looked up. The sound came again. Not from the attic. From the ceiling directly above the hallway, but not in the way I remembered. Before it sounded distant, contained. Now it felt closer. Like there was no space between it and me anymore. And then it moved. A faint, careful motion. Not across the attic. Across the ceiling. Following me. And in that moment, something became painfully clear. It hadn't been staying up there. It had been staying just out of reach. I stopped moving. The sound stopped too. For a moment, the house fell into complete silence again. The kind that feels too perfect, too controlled. Like something was waiting to see what I would do next. I stood there in the hallway, staring up at the ceiling, not at the attic hatch, at the space between the walls. That's when it hit me. It was never in the attic. The attic was just where I thought it was. A place to keep my attention. A place to keep me looking up. Because as long as I believed it was above me, I wouldn't think to check anywhere else. A slow, cold realization settled in. I wasn't listening to something overhead. I was listening to something inside the structure of the house itself. Between the walls, between the ceiling and the floor, moving freely. I forced myself to lower my gaze, to stop looking up. And that's when I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The sound didn't come from above anymore. It came from directly in front of me, from inside the wall, right at head level. And for the first time, I understood why my mom never explained the rule. Because it wasn't about the attic. It was about making sure I never realized where it actually was. I didn't believe in things like that anymore. Not after I moved out. The new house was smaller, cleaner, newer. No strange rules, no quiet warnings, no ceiling hatch sitting in the middle of a hallway. Just a normal place. A place that made sense. That's what I told myself. The first night felt fine. Unpacking, setting things up, getting used to the silence of a place that didn't carry any history I knew about. It felt empty, but in a normal way. The kind of empty you expect when a house hasn't been lived in for a while. I went to bed without thinking about it. No rules, no restrictions, no reason to look up. But that was the point. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling, noticing how smooth it was. No cracks, no seams, no attic door, nothing above me. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally relax, like whatever had been in that house, whatever had made my mom say those things, was gone, left behind. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Then I heard it, a faint shift, above me. At first, I didn't react. My mind tried to explain it away immediately. Neighbors, pipes, something settling in a house I wasn't used to yet. New places always have their own sounds. That's what I told myself. I stayed still in bed, staring at the ceiling. Smooth, flat, nothing there. No hatch, no attic, nothing that could hold anything above me. The sound came again. A faint shift, soft, controlled, exactly the same. My chest tightened, not because of the sound itself, but because I recognized it. The timing, the weight, the way it paused between movements. It wasn't random. It wasn't new. It was familiar. Too familiar. I sat up slowly, my eyes locked on the ceiling, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. The sound didn't move across the room. It stayed directly above me, like it had found me, like it knew exactly where I was. That's when a thought crossed my mind that I couldn't ignore. I hadn't brought anything with me. No objects, no boxes, nothing from that house. And yet, the sound was exactly the same, which meant whatever had been there before hadn't stayed behind at all. The next day, I checked the house, not out of panic, out of logic. If there was a sound above me, there had to be space, a gap, some kind of structure that could explain it. Even if there wasn't an attic, there had to be something between the ceiling and the roof. That's what I told myself. I walked through every room slowly, paying attention to the details I had ignored before. The ceilings were low, smooth, consistent, no seams, no panels, no signs of access anywhere, no hatch, no door, nothing. I even stepped outside, looking up at the roof line, trying to estimate the space inside. It didn't match. There wasn't enough room above the ceiling for anything to move like that, not even close. I went back inside, standing in the middle of the room, looking up again. Flat, empty, impossible. And yet, that night, when I lay down again, I already knew what I was going to hear. Because the problem wasn't where the sound came from anymore. The problem was that there was no place for it to come from at all. And somehow, that made it feel closer. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I lay on my back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it. I didn't have to wait long. It came at the same time, exactly the same. A soft shift, then silence, then another. My body tensed immediately, but this time I didn't pretend it was nothing. I focused on it completely, listening, counting the seconds between each movement. The pattern hadn't changed, which meant it hadn't followed me by accident. It had continued. Like nothing about the move mattered. Like I was just part of the routine now. I swallowed slowly, keeping my eyes fixed upward. Then I noticed something new. The pauses were shorter, subtly, but enough to feel different, closer together, more frequent. Like whatever was making the sound didn't need as much time anymore, didn't need as much space. I held my breath, listening as the next movement came faster than before. And that's when the thought hit me. Not as an idea, but as something I suddenly knew. It wasn't getting louder. It was getting closer. And there was nothing above me anymore to keep it at a distance. By the third night, something changed. Not the sound, the way it behaved. I was already awake when it started, lying still, waiting for the pattern I had come to expect. The first movement came right on time, soft, controlled, deliberate, then silence, then the second. Everything felt the same, until it didn't. The third sound came too quickly. I frowned slightly, my eyes fixed on the ceiling as I tried to count the gap between them. It was shorter. Not by much, but enough to notice. I stayed perfectly still, focusing harder now. The next one came faster again, and then another. The pattern wasn't repeating anymore. It was compressing. Like whatever was making the sound didn't need as much time between movements. Didn't need to stay hidden as long. My chest tightened. Because the sound wasn't just happening above me anymore. I felt closer, heavier, like the space between us was shrinking. And then, for the first time, it didn't pause at all. A slow, continuous shift directly above my head, and I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't following a routine. It was adjusting to me. I stopped trying to count. There was no point anymore. The pattern was gone. What replaced it felt intentional. I lay there, completely still, listening as the sound continued. Slow, controlled, but no longer spaced out. It wasn't pausing. It wasn't repeating. It was moving. And for the first time, I could tell where. Not above me, across me. From one side of the ceiling to the other, the sound dragged slowly like something shifting its weight along the surface. Careful, measured, tracking. My chest tightened as I followed it with my ears, not daring to move my head. It passed over me, then stopped, right above my face. The silence that followed felt different, not empty, focused, like whatever was there had reached a position it wanted. I held my breath, every part of me locked in place. Then something happened that made everything worse. The next movement didn't come from the ceiling. It came from inside the wall, right beside me. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't limited to one place. It wasn't above me. It was moving through the house, using it. I didn't move. I couldn't. The moment the sound shifted into the wall beside me, something inside me understood that reacting would be a mistake. So I stayed completely still, eyes open, breath shallow, listening. The sound didn't rush. It didn't panic. It continued slowly, deliberately, sliding through the structure of the wall like it wasn't solid at all, like it didn't need space to move, only direction. I could follow it now, not by sight, by feeling. A faint change in the air, a pressure, a subtle shift that told me exactly where it was without ever seeing it. It moved along the wall, then stopped, right beside my head. I felt my pulse spike, my entire body tightening as I stared forward, refusing to turn. Then, after a long pause, it moved again, downward, inside the wall, following the exact line where I was lying, tracking me, matching my position. And that's when the realization hit, clear, unavoidable. It wasn't just moving through the house. It was following me, not guessing, not searching. It knew exactly where I was at all times. It stopped, right next to my head, not fading, not moving away, just stopping. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Not empty, focused. Like all the space in the room had narrowed down to that one point beside me. I didn't turn. I didn't even blink. Every instinct in me was screaming to move, to look, to confirm what was there. But something deeper held me still, because I understood something now. It wasn't just following me. It was waiting for me to react. Seconds passed, or maybe longer. Time didn't feel real anymore. Then slowly, I felt it. Not touching, but close enough that the air changed. A pressure just beside my face, like something leaning closer without making a sound. I kept my eyes forward, my body locked in place. And then it shifted again, not along the wall, not above me, inward, closer. And in that moment, a single thought settled in my mind with absolute clarity. It didn't need to hide anymore, because it already knew I knew it was there. I didn't move. I didn't react. But something changed anyway. The moment I understood it was there, truly understood, not just suspected, the entire feeling in the room shifted. It wasn't hiding anymore. The silence lost its tension, not because it was gone, because it didn't need to pretend. I could feel it now in a way I hadn't before, not just beside me, but around me, inside the walls, above the ceiling, beneath the floor, everywhere at once, not separate, connected, like the house wasn't a place it moved through. It was the thing itself, My breathing slowed, not by choice, but because something in me knew that reacting would only make it worse, because it wasn't watching from a distance anymore. It didn't need to. It already knew everything about where I was, how I was lying, where I was looking. And then the final thought settled in, cold and absolute. I didn't bring it with me. It didn't follow me. I had just moved into another place where it already was. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed exactly where I was, staring forward, waiting for something, anything, to change. But nothing did. The pressure stayed. The presence stayed. I didn't move closer. I didn't move away. I just existed. And somehow that was worse, because it meant it didn't need to act. It already had what it wanted. Morning came slowly, not with relief, but with a quiet shift in the atmosphere. The house felt lighter again, like nothing had happened, like everything had reset. I sat up carefully, my eyes scanning the room. Empty, normal, safe, just like before. But I knew better now, because the moment I stood up, I heard it again. Not above me, not in the walls, behind me. A soft shift. Close, too close. I froze. And that's when I understood something my mom had never said out loud. The rule was never about the attic. It was about not noticing. Because once you do, it doesn't stay hidden anymore. And it doesn't stay where you expect it to be. We weren't supposed to use the attic. And that was the first thing the previous owners told us. Not as a warning, more like a passing detail, something they mentioned casually while handing over the keys, like it didn't really matter. The attic's just storage, the man said. You probably won't need it. My dad nodded like that made sense. I didn't. Because if it was just storage, why bring it up at all? The house itself was perfect, clean, recently renovated, nothing out of place. It didn't feel old. It didn't feel like anything had happened there. Just normal. The kind of place you move into and immediately feel comfortable. That's what everyone said. The attic hatch was in the hallway ceiling, smaller than I expected. No visible handle, just a thin outline where it blended into the paint. Easy to ignore. And for the first few days, we did. No one talked about it. No one looked at it. But sometimes, when the house got quiet, I'd catch my mom glancing up at it. Not for long, just a second. Like she was checking something. And every time she did, she looked away a little too quickly. The first night felt normal. Too normal. We had just finished unpacking most of the boxes, and the house already felt lived in. Lights were on. Voices filled the rooms. Everything had that warm, settled feeling that comes after a long move. Nothing strange. Nothing out of place. I went to bed without thinking about the attic at all. No rules. No warnings. Just a quiet house and a new beginning. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling, noticing how smooth it looked. No cracks. No marks. Just a clean surface stretching above me. I almost fell asleep. Then I heard it. A soft shift. So quiet, I wasn't even sure it was real. I stayed still, listening. Nothing. Just silence again. I closed my eyes. Then it came back. The same sound. Subtle. Controlled. Above me. My eyes opened slowly. I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just the house settling. New place. New sounds. That's all. But something about it didn't feel random. It felt careful, like whatever made the sound wasn't moving freely. It was trying not to be noticed, and somehow that made it impossible to ignore. I asked about it the next morning, not seriously, not like I expected anything real. "Did you hear something last night?" I said, trying to keep it casual. My dad barely looked up from his phone. "Old house," he said. "You'll hear stuff." The same answer, the same tone, like it didn't matter. But my mom didn't answer right away. She was standing by the sink, her back turned to us, holding a cup that she wasn't drinking from. I watched her for a second. "From the attic," I added. That made her freeze. Not visibly, but enough to notice. She didn't turn around. "Probably pipes," she said. Too quickly. Too quiet. I frowned slightly. It didn't sound like pipes. That's when she turned, slowly. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes weren't. They weren't confused. They weren't curious. They were checking me. "You didn't open it," she said. Again, not a question. I shook my head. "No." She held my gaze for a second longer than necessary, then nodded once. "Good," she said, and turned back to the sink. No explanation, no concern, nothing. But this time, it didn't feel like dismissal. It felt like confirmation. That night, I didn't wait for it. I expected it. I lay in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, already counting the seconds in my head before anything even happened. And right on time, it did. A soft shift. Exactly the same as before. Not random, not delayed, precise. My chest tightened, but this time I didn't pretend it was nothing. I listened carefully, focusing on every detail, the pause, the movement, the spacing between each sound. It was identical to the night before, not similar. Identical. I swallowed slowly because that meant something I didn't want to accept. It wasn't reacting. It wasn't adjusting. It was repeating. Like it had done this before. Like it had done this many times. Not just with me. I stayed still, listening as the pattern continued. Slow, controlled, deliberate. Then something changed. Not in the sound. In the feeling. The next movement felt closer. Not louder. Closer. And suddenly, the pattern didn't feel like routine anymore. It felt like a process. And I had the horrible realization that made my stomach drop. It wasn't just happening again. It was continuing from where it had left off. The next night, it didn't start where I expected. I lay there, already tense, already counting, waiting for the first sound to come at the same moment as before. But it didn't. The silence stretched longer, unnaturally long, long enough that I almost convinced myself it had stopped, that maybe whatever this was over. Then it came, not above me, not centered, from the far side of the room. A soft shift, distant, but unmistakable. My chest tightened immediately, because that had never happened before. I stayed still, listening as the next sound came sooner than expected. Closer this time. Not random, not scattered. Directional. Moving. I followed it without turning my head, tracking the subtle changes in the air, the way the sound traveled through the structure. It crossed the room, slowly, deliberately, until it reached the space directly above me again, and stopped. The silence that followed felt different, not routine, not repeating. It felt like something had just tested the space, adjusted, and then chosen its position. And in that moment, I understood something that made everything worse. It wasn't just repeating a pattern anymore. It was learning the layout of where I was. The next time it moved, it didn't stay above me. That was the first real difference. I lay there, completely still, following the sound as it shifted across the ceiling like before. Slow, careful, controlled. Then it stopped, right above me. The same position it had chosen the night before. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it moved again, but not across. Down. A faint, dragging shift, subtle, almost impossible to notice unless you were already listening for it. My breath caught. Because the sound didn't travel along the ceiling anymore, it pressed into it, as if something was testing the boundary, pushing against it. I stared upward, my eyes locked on the exact spot where the sound came from, even though there was nothing to see. Flat surface, perfectly still. But the feeling was wrong. The next movement came slower, heavier, and closer. Not physically closer, but present. Like whatever was there wasn't just moving through the house anymore. It was trying to move through the space between us. And that's when the realization settled in, cold and unavoidable. It wasn't just learning where I was. It was learning how to reach me. I don't know why I moved. Up until that point, I had done everything right. Stayed still, stayed quiet, pretended I didn't notice. But something changed. Not in the room. In me. The pressure above me had become too much, too close, too intentional. It didn't feel like I was just listening anymore. It felt like I was waiting, and I couldn't stand it. Slowly, without thinking, I turned my head. Just a little. Just enough to break the stillness. The sound stopped instantly. Not faded. Stopped. My chest tightened as I froze mid-motion, realizing what I had just done. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, something shifted. Not above me. Beside me. Inside the wall. Closer than before. I forced myself not to move again, my eyes fixed forward. But it was too late. The silence felt different now. Not controlled. Alert. Like something had just been given a signal. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't just tracking me. It was reacting to me. And I had just told it exactly where I was. The moment I moved, everything changed. The silence didn't return. It broke. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But in a way that felt active. The sound came back immediately, but not from where it had been before. It wasn't above me. It wasn't even beside me anymore. It was everywhere. Small, controlled shifts moving through the walls, across the ceiling, beneath the floor. Too many to track. Too precise to ignore. My chest tightened as I lay completely still, realizing what I had done. It wasn't searching anymore, it knew. The movements weren't random, they were coordinated. Closing in. I tried to slow my breathing, to stay calm, to go back to pretending I didn't notice. But it didn't matter anymore. Because something had changed in the way it moved. It wasn't avoiding me. It was responding, adapting. And then slowly, the movement stopped again. Not at a distance. Not somewhere in the house. Right next to me. Close enough that the air shifted. And for the first time, I felt something I couldn't explain. Not touch, not sound, presence, immediate, certain, like whatever had been moving through the house had finally reached me. And this time, it wasn't going to move away. I didn't try to get up. I didn't try to run, because something in me already knew it wouldn't matter. The presence beside me didn't move, but it didn't need to. The house felt complete, not empty, not quiet, complete, like everything had settled into place. My breathing slowed on its own, shallow and controlled, as if my body understood that anything else would make it worse, because now there was no distance left, no ceiling, no walls, nothing separating me from it anymore. And that's when the final realization came, not as a thought, but as something I suddenly understood. It had never been trying to reach me. It had always been around me. Every sound, every movement, every pattern I had followed. It wasn't learning the house. It was teaching me how to notice it, slowly, carefully, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. Because once I understood, once I recognized what was happening, there was no way to pretend it wasn't there. And that's when it changed. Not in position, in purpose. It wasn't hiding anymore. It was waiting for me to realize that I was already inside it. Morning came, like nothing had happened. Light filled the room, soft and normal, washing away the tension of the night as if it had never existed. The walls looked still. The ceiling looked empty. Everything was exactly how it should be. I sat up slowly, my body stiff, my eyes scanning every corner of the room. Nothing. No movement, no sound, just a house. I almost convinced myself it was over, that whatever I felt and whatever I heard was just something my mind created in the dark. Then I stood up, and the floor creaked beneath me, a normal sound, except it didn't stop there. Another shift followed, not from the floor, not from the ceiling, from inside the wall, close, too close. I froze, and in that moment, everything became clear. It was never about where it was. Not the attic, not the ceiling, not the walls. The rule had never been about a place. It was about awareness. Because the moment you notice it, really notice it, you don't just hear it anymore. You feel it around you, behind you, inside the space you think is safe. And that's when the real truth settles in. You don't live in the house. The house lives around you. And it has been listening the entire time.